Hey, it's time for another start of a larger tutorial series. We're actually going to start covering UIX now. I've been having this requested to me sort of once or twice a week by various people. They want UIX tutorials, so here it is. We get started. It's going to be a few videos. There's a lot to cover. I want to cover, in this one, we're going to cover the foundations, such as what is UIX, when you should use it, how to get started, and by the end of this tutorial, we'll have unfortunately just a rectangle with a color in it, but that's how things go when we explain the foundations. I think it's very important to explain the foundations here because I didn't actually have them explained to me when I started playing around with UIX, and so I was very confused. With the foundation explained though, I do like the system. I like using it for suitable areas. So let's get going. First we'll talk about what UIX even is. So UIX is the UI engine which Neos uses for sort of 99% of its UI. What do I mean by UI? In terms of UI, I mean any sort of like thing that's in front of you that has interactivity in it that you would expect to see on a 2D screen. So things like checkboxes, buttons, text, etc. To prove that this is occurring and that most things are UX, I'm going to hop over into Smooth POV here, and I've got some examples here. So this is the legacy inventory. All the squares here and even the thumbnails that you're seeing from the Neos Essentials folder, that's UIX. All the buttons at the top here, that's UIX. The only thing that's not UX here are these rounded meshes that are sort of, the orangey color around that. That's just part of the sort of legacy UI pattern that Neos used for its panels. Those are still usable. You can use them for your own UI, but these days people just sort of make UIX float by itself in the world, and it still looks quite cool. You also see it here on the inspector. Again, those meshes around the edge, they're regular meshes, but they're sort of like an overlaid two-dimensional screen on top of those meshes, and that's what the actual inspector is. So, you've got the components and slots on the left, or the slots on the left and the components on the right. That's all UIX. Additionally, here's a logics node. This one happens to be button events. It's a cool node. That's all UIX. Not the behavior of the node, just the visual representation of the node here. So the fact that this is gray and there's a square here, that's UIX. The fact that this says button events, that's UIX. The fact that this is a rectangle that's white, that's UIX, etc. Let's go ahead and turn on my private UI as well, and you'll see, hey, the same thing's happening here. This UI that I used to record every single video, it's also UX. Again, not the mesh around it, but anything over it. Just imagine a 2D layer load on top of it. So there you go. You'll see it pretty much everywhere now that I've told you where it is. Let's now talk about when you should use it. So I do want to make a plea here, which is please only use it for when you need two-dimensional UI. I've seen some cases in the world, and I don't fault anyone for doing this, it's just like a matter of preference for me, where I would rather expect physical UI to be there. What do I mean by physical UI? So let's imagine you're in an airplane cockpit and you're holding the joystick of the plane, and you've got thousands of souls that are in this plane at your hands. You're not going to want a two-dimensional screen for that. You're going to want a joystick that you can pull and you can turn and you can feel the weight of the plane. Some planes, depending on what type of plane it is, they've also got pedals which do different flaps of the plane. Again, those are physical UI, and they're a lot more sort of tactile, and they give you a lot more feeling of being in the world. So if you've got, knobs, levers, buttons, switches, all sorts of stuff like that, consider making them as physical UI, and then if you do need to, make them as UI. That's totally fine. I just wanted to say that because sometimes I do see stuff where I'm like, that's a valve for like letting out some steam. I'd love if that was like a physical valve and I could go up to it with my controllers and spin it, but instead I kind of just have to sort of drag it around as a 2D UX element. But there you go. That's my plea over. Let's move on to creating some basic UX. Let me clean up a little bit here. So I'm going to close the inspector, close the inventory, and get rid of that logics node, and hop over into Smooth POV. I've got some visual assets behind me that will be linked in the video description. They're also available in my public folder, and I'll be bringing them out as I start to explain stuff. The first thing I'm going to do is take a look at an example UIX that is really easy to create. All you need is a developer tooltip here. Once the developer tooltip is equipped, you can go to Create New, Object, UIX Canvas right at the bottom here. And this will create just a big canvas that's full of a lot of stuff for you. It's got buttons, it's got sliders, it's got Edit Me, which allows you to sort of edit the text. Like I could backspace here and put potato. I'll just type pot here. This also scrolls, it shows you all sorts of UX stuff. And most of the people that have been learning UX up to now have either been shown it by other people or have studied this panel. This panel is actually part of the Neos engine. It's made in the C# code and made available by Fruits when he was playing around with UX when he first introduced it to Neos. I like it because it can sometimes remind me of how to do things that I've forgotten how to do, but it's actually not that good for beginners. If you want to do everything as a beginner, you should create everything from scratch. Let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to get rid of this. This also isn't grabbable, so it's kind of difficult to sort of play around with. I'm just going to get rid of it like that, and then we'll be able to start again from scratch. So to start from scratch, what we're going to need to do is create the objects involved in getting a canvas together, and that needs to start with a canvas. I should have actually prefaced that and explain what a canvas is. So a canvas is the two-dimensional rectangle that renders all of the UI that's underneath it. So let's go ahead and create that canvas. So we're going to go ahead and open up a context menu of our developer tooltip here and go to create new and then go to empty object. This will create an empty object in the world, and right now everything's normal. Like you could attach a mesh to this, or make it look like a potato or whatever you wanted to do. Everything's normal. We're going to then start getting towards what I call UIX land, which is where we start adding components and things start looking a little bit weird until we adjust some things. Let's go for it. So on this empty object, I'm going to go ahead and attach component. So attach component, UIX, canvas. And that's the first component for UIX. Now, when this is added, you won't be able to notice it because it's just far too big. But if you mouse your laser around the area, you'll be able to see it. There is a giant collider now. The reason this has occurred is because when you add this canvas component, it sets up a box collider which uses the size of the canvas, in this case 1920 by 1080, and puts that into the box collider. And so what that's done is it's created a box collider that is 1920 by 1080 units in Near's terms. So that's like 1,920 meters by 1,080 meters. That's no good. That's huge. Why is it doing this? The reason why it's doing this is because UIX operates on pixels rather than Near's units, which are meters, etc. in the world. So that what usually happens with any UX that you'll see is it's actually shrunk down a little bit from the regular size that you might see in the world. To illustrate this, I'm going to go ahead and respawn that button events node. I can't spawn it because of that giant collider. And we can go ahead and inspect this. You'll see that we've inspected the canvas, and you'll see that the canvas is at 0.01 scale here. And that's what's happened here. It's got that canvas and it's shrunk down that slot such that the box collider can still function. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to go ahead and shrink our big box that we've made here down to 0.01. So I'm just going to type 0.01 what's in here. 0.001. And then we can drag it across between the X, Y, and Z. There we go. And now you'll see that we've got a much more realistic sized rectangle here. Now you'll notice from the canvas over here for the button events node that you can do sort of any aspect ratio that you want to do. And when you're learning UIX, I actually recommend you start with squares, because squares are kind of repeatable, they've got the same width and the same height, and it makes sort of doing calculations and maths involving canvases and laying out UIX a little bit easier. So we're actually going to do that. I'm also going to shrink things down a little bit. And the reason we're doing this is so that it lines up with my visual aid, which I'll bring over in just a moment. So if I make this 500 by 500, then you'll see that we've got a 500 by 500 canvas that has a 500 by 500 collider on it. And so now if I bring over this visual aid, I do need to update it here because I didn't add enough zeros there, but actually I think that's an appropriate number of zeros. Anyway, you'll see what we did here is we took this 500 by 500 Neos unit square that was also 500 by 500 pixels, and we shrank it down so it's still 500 by 500 pixels, but it is that much smaller. So there's that first visual aid. I'll update that one and double check the maths on that one. I made these in like a panicked hurry because I wanted to explain them using some visual aids, so that one's not that good. I'll update it for you. So that's what we've done. We've now got this square. It's shrunk down, but it doesn't really do anything. So let's start it doing things. The first thing I'm going to do is make it a color. And luckily we don't need to add any more slots to do that. That will change more recently, but let's go ahead and give it a color. To do that, we're going to attach another component to it. So we're going to go ahead and go to attach component, UIX, graphics, image, and then you see it's suddenly white, and there you go. What this does is adds an image component to the canvas, to the slot here, and an image component basically says, draw this image. And an image can basically be sort of one of three things. It can be a color, just a flat color. So for example, here, there is there's a white image somewhere on the canvas here that's creating this button events background. It's probably this image right here. Yep, there you go. It's white. So there you go. That's what's making the background color of those nodes white. It can also be an icon. So for example, here on the inspector, because remember inspectors are just UIX, this enabled checkbox, this checkbox icon here, you see that check? that's a UIX image with an icon set in it, and I'll actually cover that a little bit later. And the icon here is, of a check mark, but can also be whatever you would like. If you see icons anywhere else, like for example here, this delete trash icon, that trash icon there, that's a UIX image as well, with the sprite set to an icon of that trash can. That's how that works. You also see that there's a material field for the image. The material field is just controlling how the UIX canvas interacts with the world. We won't need to cover that in this particular tutorial, but if you move this rectangle around, you may notice sometimes that other things might render in front or behind it. We'll cover that in a little bit later. I still want to just go over some more basics now before we go on to stuff like that. So there you go, that's the image. One of the good things that you'll notice about UX is you can actually change this image and make it a different color. Here you go, now it's red, without adding another material. If you've made sort of cubes or other meshes in the past using other parts of Neos, you'll know that if you want two cubes of a different color, they need to be different materials. The color tip does help you with this, but sometimes they need to be two different materials, and that becomes sort of annoying sometimes when you want got a lot of different colors going on here. UIX solves that for UI problems, where you can just add different images that have different colors. So that's the image component. We're going to be talking about that one a little bit more as we start playing around with more logics, not logics UX, sorry, as it's really easy to use the image component to see what the dimensions of the particular part of the UX that you're looking at do. But I need to talk about that a little bit first. So UIX is made up of a bunch of slots that are all in a sort of hierarchy up and down the hierarchy, and they all have what's called a RectTransform on them. You can actually see that there is a RectTransform on this canvas already, but I'm going to create a sub object here within this canvas just to sort of play around and show you how RectTransform works. So at the top of this empty object here, I'm going to hit star, which will create an empty object child, and then here we can go ahead and go to attach component. We're going to go to UIX graphics image again, and I'm going to set this one to be, let's go for, I want to go for like clashing colors, so we'll go for a nice green there. I'm actually going to change that one back to white. Just don't want to clash your eyes too much. There we go. We've got a nice sort of lime green here. Make that a little bit darker, I think. Yeah. Cool, that's good. Sorry, I'm being pedantic with colors. I'm slightly colorblind, so sometimes I'm just like, I don't know if this looks good on camera. Give me some feedback if it's problematic for you, but we'll go for this sort of muted green. So what we've got here is we've got a sub object, and what you notice when I added it and when I added that image to it, it's actually drawing on top of that. So if I were to go ahead and turn this off, for example, by deactivating it, you'll see that we get the image that's behind it. And that's what's happening here. There's a hierarchy of things that are all drawn on top of each other here. And again, this is one of the cool parts of this system is, hey, I had a white square here, and I added another image component beneath it, and now it's a green square. Now I'm going to change some things, and I know ahead of time what these do, and then I'll explain what's going on here, but I just want to illustrate what's going on here. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to change this anchor max property from 1. I'm going to go ahead and change it to 0.5 here. And then you'll see something very interesting is happening. What you've now got is half of the rectangle here is this green color and half of it is the white color. And what's happened there is I've changed the RectTransform of that particular UI element. And so as I said, UI in UIX and Neos is just stacked on top of each other. RectTransforms and graphics that are all drawing on top of each other is a big stack. That's what's happening here. I've changed the dimensions of the RectTransform of our green rectangle, and so the yellow one that's behind the white one that's behind it is peeking through here. Now RectTransforms do take a little while to get used to, and so I've got another visual aid here which helps even me to this day, and I only made it 5 minutes ago, so that's cool. This explains how a RectTransform operates. So I'm going to bring this over and we'll talk about it a little bit. Let's move this one to the side here. So RectTransforms have essentially 3 different properties on them. They are represented in this group here: anchor min, anchor max, offset min, offset max, and pivot. But they are 3 different properties. The anchor min and anchor max are slightly different, but they're the same sort of units in space. So 3 different sort of units and 5 properties. So we'll talk about the anchor first, which is the one I just changed and told you not to pay too much attention to until I had chance to cover it. The anchor determines how the rectangle is drawn here. So I've got a picture here to kind of help you out. Anchor minimum or anchor min here, is the bottom left of the rectangle you're trying to draw. So in this case here, we've got an anchor min at 0, 0, which is this x here, so it's at the bottom here. And we're going to draw a rectangle to the anchor max. And in this case, the anchor max is 1, 1. And this is a decimalized percentage, so 0, 0 means 0%, and 1, 1 means 100%, 100%. So if we were to go ahead and change our anchor min from 0, 0 and 0.51 back to 0, 0 and 1, 1, we get this square here drawn. And so you'll see again here we've got that green color going across the whole space. So that is the anchor. As an example here, if I want to change this to say this anchor max to 0.5, 0.5, what this will do is it'll move the top right anchor here, anchor max, down into the middle of the image here. So let's go ahead and do that. So if I change anchor max here from 1 to 0.5 again, and I change anchor max on the Y from 1 to 0.5 here, you'll see that we've now got that because it's moved that rectangle down into the middle of that canvas. I could now duplicate this rectangle transform here by hitting duplicate, and then we've got another empty object child, and I can change this one, and I can change it a little bit differently. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to change it so that anchor minimum is 0.5 on both X and Y, and anchor maximum is 1 on both X and Y. And now you'll see that I've got this kind of sort of checkerboard going. And what I've got here is I've got two rectangles that are drawing on top of the underlying white rectangle in this green color. And one is drawing from here to here, and one is drawing from here to here. And you can do this like in all sorts of dimensions and all sorts of configurations to really sort of achieve whatever you really want. Like for example here, I could change the Y here from 0.5 to 0. And now I've got sort of, 3 quadrants here being this green color and that top left corner here being that white color. Or I could go ahead and change, let me think about this one here. Anchor max. Yes, here we go. If I change this to 0.5 here. 5. Oh, that's what we had before. I wanted to do that the other way around. If I change this to 0.5 and then this to 0, we'll get another shape. There we go. Now we've got the bottom, but this bottom is actually 2 images. So if I went ahead and changed this color, so for example here we can make this one pink, you'll see there we go. We've got those 2 rectangles at play here. I hope this makes sense. It's really difficult to kind of explain. So if you didn't get this time, that's fine. Give me some feedback. Maybe I'll make a separate video just on RectTransform. So there we go. That is the anchor. We need to talk about the offset as well. So the offset is slightly different from the anchor point in that it offsets the rectangle by a pixel value, not a percentage value. So again, here on my visual aid here, I've got this offset set here on my imaginary rectangle here, as we're offsetting the minimum value and the maximum value by 50 on the X. And what that's doing is it's shifting that rectangle by 50 pixels to the right here. So we can go ahead and do that with our pink rectangle here. We're going to go ahead and set offset minimum here to be 50. And offset maximum here on the X as well here to be 50. And now what you'll see is that we've got this this pink rectangle has shifted over to the right by 50 pixels. And you'll see it's actually coming out of the side of the canvas here, which is usually a bad thing. You can actually fix that a little bit later, but it doesn't matter here. It actually allows me to illustrate what's going on. We can do the same thing here with the Y, and that will shift it down. Or in this case up, actually. The key thing to note about the offset value here is you can actually make them negative. So here if I made this Y negative 50, and negative 50 on the maximum as well, there we go. Now that's shifted down. Wherever possible, I would recommend using anchors first and then offsets. You can fall into the trap of basically relying too heavily on offsets, and that can lead you to issues later, particularly when you're making subunits from this. So for example here, if I wanted to say, I don't know, draw an icon within this pink square, I might have difficulties doing that if I wanted the icon to be still on the canvas because I've offsetted it rather than shrinking the square to that particular coordinate space. So there you go. There is one more field on this RectTransform, and it's the pivot. I haven't actually found a use for the pivot. I'm not sure if there's even one implemented yet. I haven't seen it, but the pivot is just the center of the rectangle. So here you see pivot 0.5, 0.5 is the center. I think that's not actually the center of the square. Like I said, I made these in Inkscape in like 20 minutes. So they're not exactly perfect. If you're a graphics designer, you want to help me out by making some better ones, go for it. I'd love to see them. So that is the RectTransform for you. I know this might take a little bit to get used to, so we're going to try some more exercises with the RectTransform as we go through different parts of the tutorial series. We'll be covering RectTransforms pretty much like every video, because the way that you draw complex UI is you move rects around until they resemble what you would like, and then you style them different colors or add interactivity to them. Let me check how long we've been recording. 19 minutes. Okay, well, we're going to leave off here. We covered the canvas. We covered the RectTransform here. If you want some homework, which is maybe a new thing we'll try and make this rectangle, and try and make a pretty rectangle of any kind. Send me pictures of the rectangles that you've made. Try some colors, try some effects, try some stuff like that. See what you can make in terms of shapes or patterns. These are just rectangles, and they can be any colors you like. And like you've seen, there's no material need. You can just make as many rectangles as you want, as many colors as you want. Like I can make another one here by just hitting duplicate. I can go ahead and clear this offset. I can change its color. And now we've got that pattern. And that took 5 seconds to do. So just play around with RectTransforms, try and get used to them. Like I say, you can find these pictures. I'll tidy them up just a little bit because there's a mistake on that one on the left here in the video description. They're also in my public folder under tutorials. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you next time for part 2 of UIX.